I've been holding on to this text for quite some time now, not because I can't bring myself to delete it, but because a part of me needs to remember every word. She hit me with, "No more intimacy, deal with it." No warning, no explanation, just a few taps on her screen and my world was turned upside down. You know those moments when something so unreal happens that your brain just refuses to process it? That was me, staring at my phone, trying to fit this raw, confusing emotion into a space that used to be filled with trust. At first, I refused to believe it. I thought maybe it was some sort of twisted joke. But my wife, Heather, she's not the joking type, especially not about stuff like this, and definitely not these past few weeks. So I let that message just hang there. I didn't write back. I stayed glued to the edge of our bed, gripping my phone, with my mind slowly rewinding through the weeks, maybe months. Something had been slipping away from our marriage, like air leaking out of an old tire, quietly but impossible to miss if you paid attention. And, well, I hadn't been paying enough attention. Heather and I have been married for 8 years. The first three were amazing. The following two, pretty good. But the last three, let's say it was a lot of feeling emotionally hungry and getting a bit too comfortable with our dull routine. I chalked it up to just a rough patch. Life's usual ups and downs, work stress piling on. But Heather, she treated it like a sign to shake things up. And to her, it seemed totally fine to break something big like this over a text, to tell me I wasn't worthy of her love or want anymore. That night, I didn't confront her. She came home late, as usual, barely acknowledged I was there before heading straight to the bathroom. I heard the water running for ages. When she finally came out, her hair slicked back, she made her way to the guest room with a towel and a cup of tea, acting like nothing had happened, like I was a ghost. The bed felt massive that night, cold, empty. And for once, I didn't try to make things right. No knocking on her door, no typing out a text asking what I'd done wrong, no sitting at the kitchen table hoping she'd snap back to reality. All right, I thought to myself, let's handle this. Over the next few days, something quietly shifted inside me. No dramatic exits, no chucking my wedding ring into the garbage, no crashing at a buddy's place. It was more like a calm, measured choice. I stopped offering to make her dinner, stopped trying to gauge her mood. I quit making excuses for why she wouldn't laugh at my jokes anymore, or even look at me when we talked. It wasn't that I stopped caring, I just stopped chasing. For ages, I'd convinced myself that if I just gave more effort, more time, more money, more support, if I just kept chipping away, she'd eventually look at me like she used to, like she gave a damn. But if someone's willing to draw a line with a text, maybe it's about time to accept it for what it really is. Heather seemed to think she could keep love at arm's length and still have my loyalty. Like I'd keep revolving around her world like some grateful moon just because she said, deal with it. But that night, something shifted. It wasn't a break. It felt like a little bit of light breaking through. A week later, I started noticing her phone lighting up more. She'd giggle at messages I wasn't part of. Her excuses for late nights piled up. Team meetings, work outings, workshops, you name it. So I started paying more attention. Not out for revenge, but to understand her version of deal with it, because clearly we weren't on the same wavelength anymore. The clues were subtle, but there. Perfume before stepping out at strange times. Her phone angled away when we were on the couch. Calls from unknown numbers she'd ignore nervously when she thought I wasn't looking. But the biggest sign? It wasn't any of those things. It was how checked out she seemed from the life we'd built together. So my buddy Heather started having her friend Tessa around a lot more. They'd pop over with a bottle of wine, and soon you'd hear them laughing and chatting quietly behind closed doors. I've known Tessa forever since she and Heather were thick as thieves back in college, but I was picking up on a weird vibe lately. She seemed way more involved than before, like she had her own stakes in whatever was going down. One night, as I was headed upstairs, I caught some laughter drifting from the kitchen. They were talking about finally putting him in his place, though I missed the juicy details. Honestly, I didn't need more to understand what was going on. A line had clearly been crossed, and now I knew exactly who was helping Heather do it. I didn't storm downstairs or make a scene. I didn't even bother to finish the scotch I had sitting next to me. Instead, I headed to my study, cracked open my laptop, and started jotting down a list. every detail I could that was going to help me handle it, just like they said they would. I didn't flip our lives overnight. Nah, that'd be too obvious. I let the changes trickle in quietly. First thing, I just made myself unavailable. Not in an over-the-top way, just slowly phased out, sort of like how she'd done with me. If romance was off the table, so were the little comforts she had taken for granted. No more shoulder rubs while she ranted about her day at work. No more last-minute dinner plans or dropping reminders about meals. And my weekend errands. I skipped those too. No more faithful sidekick with a debit card in tow. I even stopped fixing things around the house. That sticky kitchen drawer? Still stuck. The flickering bathroom light? Still flickering away. When she finally noticed and asked why, all I did was look her straight in the eye and say, "You'll figure it out. You're smart." She wasn't pleased, but she didn't argue either. Our marriage had pretty much turned into a series of polite exchanges about household logistics. No fights, no passion, just two people managing a house like reluctant teammates on a failing project. Funny how someone's presence can feel so absent when they're right there in front of you. One morning, Heather casually pointed out that I hadn't made coffee for a while. I just shrugged it off, saying, "Figured you were looking for some space." She blinked at me, then turned away, not saying a word. It's funny, the things people think will stand firm even when they start pulling away the supports. Heather thought taking away the emotional part wouldn't affect the whole relationship, like she could remove a load-bearing wall and the house wouldn't collapse. But I wasn't looking for a fight. I wanted evidence. Tessa started coming over even more, to the point that it was getting ridiculous. I'd come home from work to find them curled up on the couch, glass of wine in hand, giggling like high schoolers at a slumber party. Every time I walked by, I'd get those awkward, forced smiles. Heather's look was all like, "Just play along," while Tessa had this look that seemed to dare me to say something. But I didn't need to ask. I was already taking notes. Not in a creepy stalker way, just smart. I began jotting down the nights Heather came home late, or her excuses that didn't jive with her outfit choices. Those so-called work events on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I kept track of those too. Then came the night with the sushi dinner. A colleague, Denise, stopped me at work saying, "Hey, I think I saw your wife at that rooftop place the other night. Were you with her?" I played it cool and shook my head. "Nope, haven't been there in ages." Denise seemed a bit perplexed. "Oh, must have been someone else. But she was rocking that green dress. You know, the one we all know." "Yeah, I knew that dress. She wore it when she wanted to make an impression. I hadn't seen it in forever." "Could have been her," I replied casually. "She's got great taste." Denise gave me this look, like she maybe wished she hadn't said anything, but I didn't mind. It was just another piece fitting into the puzzle. That evening, Heather came home looking lost in thought. She kicked off her heels and tossed her bag aside without even acknowledging me. I was chilling by the kitchen counter, eating takeout, something I hadn't done solo in years. She glanced at the food, then at me like she couldn't quite wrap her head around the change. "Didn't cook?" she asked. "Nope," I replied. "Oh." She sort of lingered, possibly expecting more from me, but I kept tight-lipped. "Long day?" I asked, making sure I hit the right casual tone. "Yeah, deadlines," she said awkwardly, before eyeing the wine rack and drifting away. I kept savoring my meal. This new groove felt strangely satisfying, and over the next few days, over a few quiet weeks, I learned quite a bit. I stopped wearing my wedding band and told Heather it was because working out had made my fingers swell. That was partly true. I'd embraced a healthier lifestyle, hitting the gym regularly, eating better, and managed to lose about 12 pounds, toning up in the areas Heather used to touch so casually. But now it seemed she either didn't notice or just chose to ignore it. Maybe she had noticed, but was too stubborn to admit it. I lingered at work longer than necessary, not because I had to, but because it was possible. I didn't feel any guilt, nor did I feel the need to check in. Sometimes I'd stop by a bar, have a beer, and just lose myself in observing people. Couples enjoying themselves, singles trying to make connections, at least they were putting in the effort. That's when it became clear. Heather wasn't trying anymore. Not for me, not for herself, and certainly not for the image she was maintaining. She seemed to believe she was entitled to affection, but wasn't willing to give it in return. The hardest part came late one night when I overheard a conversation. Heather assumed I was asleep upstairs, but as I went down for a drink of water, her voice stopped me midway down the stairs. "I think he finally understands," she told Tessa. "He's been pretty distant lately." Tessa responded, "Good. Maybe now he'll realize how much he relied on you and start valuing what he's let go." Their quiet laughter felt like a deep cut. They were treating my emotional withdrawal like a lesson they thought I needed to learn. That's when it struck me. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about control. Heather believed she could use emotional detachment as a weapon, expecting me to plead for tiny gestures of attention. But I wasn't going to play that game. I planned on making my own unexpected move. About a week later, after overhearing that conversation, Heather's demeanor shifted. Subtle hints of unease emerged beneath her usual indifferent facade. There was more hesitation in her questions, and she discreetly watched me as I moved around the house. One evening, she even asked, "Is something up?" I just smiled and said, "Nope." Silence, I discovered, can become more deafening than yelling if you let it linger, and she was starting to notice. Her days continued with long showers and late nights vaguely attributed to events with Tessa. But her confidence was waning. Little hesitations stood out, like when she'd double-check her lipstick or hesitate before grabbing her keys. Then came the evening she invited me to dinner with Tessa, for the first time in over a year. That's when I knew things were shifting. She was testing the limits she'd pushed. "Can't," I said, focused on my work at the laptop. "I have plans." She didn't press further. My plans, once irrelevant to her, were now something she was out of the loop on. And then Tessa appeared. 2 days later, unannounced and with an air of misplaced confidence. I'd arrived home early, fiddling with a kitchen cabinet that needed fixing. Not for her, but because I couldn't ignore it. The doorbell rang, and she strolled in, hair done up, sunglasses perched atop her head, with an expression somewhere between friendly and smug. "Hey, stranger," she said, glancing around. "Is Heather here?" "Nope," I replied. She looked a bit disappointed but not surprised. She mentioned some party plans they needed to discuss. I just shrugged and continued my task. Tessa leaned on the counter, arms crossed, prodding gently. "So, everything okay with you two?" That's when I met her gaze with none of the usual charm. "We're doing whatever Heather wants us doing," I said, watching a hint of amusement cross Tessa's face. "She mentioned you've been distant." "She's perceptive," I replied, adding smoothly. "It takes one to know one." Her eyebrows lifted at that. "You think I'm cold?" I shook my head. "I think you're fanning a fire you started, and now you're surprised it's spreading," I told her. She took a deep breath, straightening up a bit, though her confidence seemed to falter. "I was just trying to help her," she said, her voice no longer as sure. I told her softly that she'd been emotionally unavailable for ages. Heather needed to rediscover herself. "No," I corrected. "What she really needed was someone to stoke her ambition for power, and you just wanted to be in the front row to watch it all unfold." She didn't deny it. She didn't have to. After a pause that felt endless, she let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You're more observant than she'd like to admit," she said. "I'm done playing games," I declared. "Whatever you two were doing, it's over now." Tessa watched me, and maybe there was a flicker of regret in her eyes. "You're not as clueless as she thinks," she said. I remained calm and shot back. "And you're not as loyal as she believes." That clearly stung. She grabbed her purse and left without another word. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, I picked up my phone and opened the voice recording app. Every word of our conversation was captured perfectly. Later that day, Heather came home earlier than expected, looking utterly worn out. It wasn't the sort of exhaustion that makeup could hide, but something much deeper. She set her purse down and paused by the kitchen island. "I ran into Denise," she said. I waited, listening. Denise told her, "You've been looking good lately, dropping some weight, dressing to impress." Still, I didn't say a word. Then Heather asked the question she dreaded. "Is there someone else?" I couldn't help but chuckle softly. "No," I said, "but you sure have made room, haven't you?" She blinked, surprised by my tone. "What do you mean by that?" she asked. "It means you shouldn't be surprised if someone leaves when you shut them out," I calmly explained. She stepped closer, accusing me of flipping the script. You're the one who shut down first, she argued. No, you ended it with a text, remember? I countered. You told me to deal with it, and so I did. She seemed ready to argue but found herself speechless. For a moment I caught something in her eyes, not guilt or sorrow, but perhaps doubt. The seeds of doubt were sown. She wasn't sure how much I'd learned, but she felt it in her bones. And as for Tessa, she wouldn't stay silent for long. People like her rarely do. The truth, when it starts to crack, doesn't collapse all at once. It slowly unravels. Our unraveling had just commenced. There's a pivotal moment in every downfall when the person who pulls the thread feels everything crashing around them. For Heather, that moment came on a Tuesday. She returned early again, suspicious in itself. She lingered at the door longer than usual, like she was rehearsing her lines. Her purse stayed on her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "Can we talk?" she finally asked. I closed my laptop, placing it on the coffee table. "Sure," I said. She perched on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, visibly nervous. I thought she might cry or explode, but instead she spoke. Tessa told her I threatened her. I laughed at that, knowing it was just the opening move. "I didn't threaten her," I remarked. "I just let her know I was on to her." "Tessa's been a good friend," Heather shot back. "No," I replied. "She's just your mirror. You like the reflection she showed you." She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Leaning forward with my elbows on my knees, I locked eyes with her. "Want to hear what she said when you weren't around?" She blinked, surprised. "What?" "I recorded it," I said. "I can play it for you. Your so-called friend talked about how she encouraged you to drift away from me, supposedly to wake me up, but she was just feeding her own power trip." Heather stood frozen. I added, "And she laughed at you, saying I'm sharper than you think. She claimed you made me out to be dense." "No," Heather whispered, her voice unsteady. "You're twisting things." I shook my head calmly. "I've got the recording. There's nothing to twist." She leaned back, eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, and her hands trembled. Whether from anger or fear, I couldn't tell. "Remember that green dress?" I asked casually, referring to one she wore to a work dinner. Heather's head snapped toward me. "Funny thing," I continued. "A coworker mentioned you weren't with colleagues. They said the guy was younger, tall, wearing a Rolex." Her lips tightened as if she was gearing up to respond, but no words came out. She didn't try to hide it at all, so I guessed out loud. "Let me guess. Your friend Tessa urged you, told you to go after what makes you feel alive, said I'd never find out." She remained silent. I laid out what was coming next. "I've already consulted a lawyer," I informed her. "The divorce papers are being prepared." She gasped, her voice breaking as she asked, "You're ending it?" I nodded, acknowledging that she had already ended it, and now I was just wrapping it up. She sprang up from her seat, thinking being closer might change something. "Can't we discuss this? It wasn't my intention." I rose too, keeping my composure. "Every word you texted, you meant it, sent it like a bomb, and I got the message, understood it, and moved on." She looked crushed, like her plans had derailed without warning. But for the first time in ages, regret shimmered in her eyes. Yet regret can't mend things. It just surfaces when there's nothing left to hold on to. She made another attempt, claiming Tessa had stirred things up, convinced her I was shutting her out. "She told me it wasn't Tessa who hit send," I cut in. "That was you." In a near whisper, she said, "I didn't think you'd stop loving me." That struck a chord, not because it felt sincere, but because of its sadness. She didn't factor in how I'd feel, just presumed I'd always be there. A hush settled over us. "I stayed," I eventually uttered softly. "I stuck around through your distant behavior, your ups and downs, your half-truths. I gave until you signaled for me to quit." Walking away to the hallway, I mentioned, "I'll be in the guest room until the papers are finalized. Expect to hear from the lawyer." Her voice chased after me, accusing, "You're divorcing me over a text." At the stairs, I halted and clarified, "No, it's not just the text. It's everything that followed." The next day, she skipped work. I overheard her crying, pacing, and likely phoning Tessa. It no longer mattered. That bridge had been torched as well. Later in the week, a message from an unknown number appeared. It was Tessa, saying she didn't mean for things to spiral so far that Heather needed a wake-up call. I didn't bother replying. Some betrayals are more about selfishness than personal spite. Some endings fit the bill. Heather didn't put up a big fight over the divorce. She suggested counseling, wept when I left with a duffel, mentioning I'd crash at my brother's. But it wasn't real resistance, just the realization that the control she thought she had wasn't over a pet, but a person who discovered freedom. Before the divorce paperwork was totally done, we met one last time at a coffee shop. She picked out a blazer and sunglasses for a cloudy day. That confidence of hers wasn't there. She carried herself as if she were heading into a job interview she wasn't ready for. After sitting down, she stirred her tea but didn't drink it. Finally, she said, "I miss you." I let the silence stretch before she continued, saying she got lost in her own mind. Let bad influences guide her. Felt invisible. "So you made me feel invisible too," I responded. That wasn't what she wanted, she claimed. I knew, but it happened anyway. Her hands shook as she sipped her tea. She blurted, "I didn't sleep with him, you know." Gazing out the window, I told her she didn't need to say that. "I didn't," she insisted. "I thought about it, was going to. But when it came to the hotel, I couldn't go through with it." I met her eyes. "But you still chose to meet him," I stated, and she had no answer. It dawned on me. It wasn't solely about betraying me, but the plans she laid out long before acting on them. Love didn't stop her. Fear did. Fear holds no love, only hesitation. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just finished." Heather seemed like she wanted to reach out, but she held back. I paused, memories bubbling up. "We used to be really happy, you know." "Yep," I mumbled. "That's pretty much how it was." That's as deep as our talks got after everything happened. The divorce came and went without too much drama. No kids were involved. Nothing too complicated to divide. We had a few bank accounts, a car each, and the house. I let her keep that. She was surprised, but I wasn't keen on holding on to something that didn't mean much anymore. On the day I wrapped up all the paperwork with my lawyer, I walked until my legs were tired. Past the coffee spots we used to hit, shops where I'd picked out birthday gifts for her, even the cinema where we danced in the lobby once because the movie put her in that kind of mood. None of it hurt. It wasn't like something was ripped away. It was more like taking a step back, like watching someone else's story, someone who gave it their all, was loyal, loved deeply, but needed to move on to keep their own self intact. A few months down the line, I bumped into Tessa unexpectedly at a bookstore. She looked a bit worn out, and when she smiled at me, it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey," she said, "you're looking all right." "Thanks," I replied. "You don't look so great." She smirked, kind of sadly. "Fair enough. Heather's cut me off too. Seems I've managed to mess up 2 friendships." "You played with fire," I pointed out, "and sometimes you get burned." She nodded, a bit slow. "I didn't mean to mess things up for you guys." "No," I said, "but letting her unravel, that was on you, not friendship. More like putting on a show." Tessa turned her gaze to the floor and said, "She still talks about you, you know. She thought you'd come back, that you wouldn't really leave for good. But she got it wrong. She gets that now." I let a moment hang between us, then replied, "Well, that's her realization." I turned away and left. No dramatic goodbyes, just the door softly closing behind me, with everything that needed to be said left unspoken. Now almost a year has passed. I've quietly rebuilt my life, joined trekking groups, learned to cook for one without feeling lonely, even dipped a toe back into dating. Not seriously, but enough to remind myself that life goes on beyond her. When folks ask why it ended, I keep it simple. We stopped being a team. That's the honest truth. Beyond the messages and the betrayals, she wasn't someone who had my back anymore. And I wasn't about to keep asking for her attention and support. Real closeness isn't just physical. It's in your talks, the way you look at each other, the choice to stay close, especially when things get tough. She picked her pride. I went with peace. In the end, I realized I didn't lose much. She did. She just figured it out when it was too late.